Quite a full agenda. We're starting, that's a little late for the stellar State of the City address that we've just participated in. It is 2:30 on Tuesday, February 19th, 2019. We are meeting in the City Center Conference Room at 351 West Center Street in Provo, Utah. Please note that this meeting is being broadcast live on the web on the Provo City Council YouTube channel, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. Please be aware that the microphones in the room pick up the noise of paper and other rustling objects, and please be aware that you can also pick up side conversations. As I was saying, we do have a pretty full meeting today, and I really hope that we don't have to continue our conversation on committees and priorities, so we will try to, if anything, make up a little time as we go along. Let's begin with a roll call. Mr. Strachan, please begin.
Cliff Strachan. Brian Jones.
Gary Winterton.
George Henry.
Elizabeth Van Horsen.
David Harding.
Kay Van Buren.
Hannah Sosa.
Dave Stewart. Dave Sewell.
Thank you, and we will begin with an opening prayer provided by Josh here.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we come before you today as public servants, as neighbors and friends and family, and we ask a special favor of thee, that thou would bless this group with all the many things that thou knowest they need at this time, that they can have a spirit of service and intelligence at their disposal, that they can review the challenges before this great city, and as we deal with loss of our fellow friend and officer, and that we can get through the healing needs that we have at this time and be able to deal with all the challenges thou knowest we have at this time. Father, please bless us with health and strength and safety, and help guide us through the next steps. And we ask for these things and say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Erie. It is proposed that we approve the following minutes. October 9th work meeting, October 23rd, these are all 2018. October 23rd work meeting, October 23rd town hall on the bond, November 13th work meeting, December 18th work meeting, and January 22nd, 2019 work meeting. Are there any objections to this proposal or any changes requested for these minutes? Seeing none, I declare the minutes approved by unanimous consent. Note on decorum, although this is a public meeting, only the presenters and those seated at the council table may speak or ask questions unless otherwise invited by the chair. We will begin with a presentation on administrative services and potential budget requests. This presentation will be given by Mr. John Borgett, our Director of Administrative Services, and this is we've allotted 60 minutes to this presentation.
Thank you. My name is John Borgett, and wanted to just, what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of start off, and then I'm going to give each of the division directors in our area an opportunity to kind of come up and answer questions and go through their specific area. Dan Follett, who's the division director for finance, is out this week, so I'll be filling in for him. Followed by me, we'll have Daniel Softly, our human resources division director. Then we'll have Rhiannon Newton, who's our justice court administrator, Dick Blackham, who's our facility services manager, and then Amanda Erkenbrack, who's our recorder, and then Josh Earig is our IS division director, will be our final individual. We're going to be mindful of time. We've tried to follow the structure that was outlined for us by the council staff, and so what my plan will be is just to kind of focus on the highlights, and then if you have further questions, you're welcome to do that. The first thing, though, as we talked about it as a management team for administrative services, we felt like the question that talked specifically about if we were asked to make a 5% cut, what would the process be that we would go through? And we felt like we discussed as a team, and so we wanted to talk about it a little bit as a department level rather than a division level. And so the first thing that we felt like we would want to do is evaluate each of the services that's provided by administrative services. We really don't think, and I've been through this myself in the past, that it's right to just do across the board cuts. A lot of times what happens by doing across the board cuts, you wind up just dropping the level of service on everything versus evaluating those services. So our recommendation would be to also look at the general plan and see what things the council is looking for and what things are out there as far as the overall plan for the city and how they align with that. Also looking at efficiency and ways, more efficient ways to do things, potentially through technology. There also could be through consolidation or duplication. Also think it's important that we look at the benefits for various services versus the costs. Quite often there may be situations where the costs far outweigh the benefits that are received. I think it's also important to seek input for the value of services, and some of the ways that that could be done. We provide a lot of internal services for the city, but also some external, and so our thoughts would be to seek out the other departments and maybe through a survey or through questioning and answering, finding out the value of the services we provide and if some of those internal services could be reduced or potentially eliminated. Also for external services from the residents and from customers, we would think it would be important to do something similar. And then most importantly, determine the impact of eliminating or reducing services. So we'd want to make sure that we looked at that very closely. Those were some of the ideas that we thought of as we thought through the process that we would want to go through as we're making, if we were asked to make a cut as large as 5%. Do you have any questions specifically related to the process or thoughts that we had as we kind of looked at that? Yes,
I know
Gary.
we did a 5% cut, what was it, six years ago?
It was
5, 6 years ago.
Yes, it was like back in 2007, 2008. Yes.
And then did we do another 2.5% at one time?
Yeah, and we also
time.
had to do some mid-year cuts as well.
Some mid-year cuts, and so you've had experience with this and how to deal with it. But I just, thank you.
Okay. Dave.
So I think it's a smart, wise approach. And if you look at it the other way, if someone said, we're going to give you 5% more money, would you just give it all across the board, or would you give it where it's needed?
No, same principles are true. And as you look at it, and it's going to come out very clearly as we go through each of the divisions in administrative services, and you'll clearly see areas where we feel like we're missing the mark and we could use more money to provide the services that we need. And you'll see other areas where we really feel like we have adequate budget to perform the service. And so it's not, it's kind of based on the service that's needed and what we provide, so yes. Okay, let's talk a little bit about finance on page 2. Just to kind of make sure that you're all aware of what finance is. I mean, it is finance. We also deal with our treasury functions as far as managing the cash throughout the city and our investments. We have our budget office, which we're all very familiar with, accounts payable, purchasing, and general insurance oversight. Do a lot of work with our insurance policies, and Dan Follett kind of heads that up as we deal with a number of insurance issues. Looking at the first question, talking about how we achieve the city goals listed in the general plan, okay, through some of the things that we're doing. Kind of looked at some of those. The annual budget, we feel like is a real important process that we go through with the municipal council as far as working on things so that we can, and it's indirectly related, but it does touch everything that's in the general plan as far as our ability to financially plan and to prepare for the future. There's a couple of areas where it talks about long-range planning and forecasting, and in Section 5 on Chapter 9, and we feel like the 5-year annual CIP, which we're getting ready to deliver to the council on the 1st of March, so we're real close there, as well as our 10-year projection that's included as part of the annual budget, are a couple of real important areas that support long-range planning. In Section 7, it talks about being open and transparent, and with the business community, we feel like our webpage that we provide links to our annual financial reports, our popular annual financial reports, as well as our budget document. Have a lot. We feel like that's used quite a bit. People get in and we're able to direct them there, and they can find specific questions. We also try to be open and receptive to questions from residents related to finance and the budget. We get, kind of comes and goes, but we do get a lot of questions, and our goal has always been to be transparent. Another thing that we're required to do is do what's called continuing disclosure, and for all of our outstanding bonds, we have a continuing disclosure requirement that provides the needed information to investors of our bonds, and so that's something that we do annually. I would also add, it's not in your list, but RFPs. We use a state service it's a company that the states pick through their state process called SciQuest, and it provides transparency on all of our RFPs, giving anyone an opportunity that's qualified to respond to an RFP and keeping that process open and transparent. For the finance division, we really feel like currently we have adequate budget for what we're doing. We feel like our staff is adequate. We did not submit any supplemental funds last year, and feel like we're able to provide the services with the budget we've got. And you'll find that you won't hear this the same for everybody, but that's kind of where we're at with finance. The one area that we have recently been thinking about and discussing is internal audit. Many large organizations have an internal audit function, which provides an opportunity for kind of an internal, independent look at internal controls, efficiencies. They can also do some testing and looking for fraud. They can also look at operational efficiencies. I feel like it would be ideal if the city had an internal audit function, and if that were the case, wouldn't recommend that actually even be part of finance. It would need to be independent. But something that we've had some discussions about, and just wanted to put that on here. And I don't know if any of you have had experience with an internal audit function, if you have any questions on it, but it's just been on our mind, and so we thought we'd go ahead and include that and leave that up for discussion. Any questions on that?
Would that require another person to come in to be the auditor for that?
I think it would. Yeah, I think that would be their. Now there's one other thought that we had that could happen and could work, and that would be, you could. One of the things that's so difficult about full-time positions is that the benefits and the costs associated with that full-time position are pretty expensive. Matter of fact, Dustin and I were looking at it, and it's around 60%, like 62%. So if you pay $100 to an employee, you pay $62 more for benefits. One thing that possibly could be done that I think could work would be to have one or multiple MPA or MBA students, probably MPA students at, like for example, BYU, and they could come in and as part of their, have a part-time job where they could come in and if they could report to someone, okay, that was not part of finance, they could perform some of these functions in a good direction. And so that's another idea that could be looked at. But anyway, I think it's something that should be on our mind, and it would be prudent for us to be thinking about that. Any other questions?
One more on that.
Sure.
Is that part of our basic audit? Did they recommend something like that? Have they ever said anything about that? They don't look at controls.
They do look at controls.
Do they? They
do, yeah. But I don't know if they've actually, Dustin, are you familiar with that? Have they recommended that to us?
No, not specifically.
They haven't, but it's something that definitely could, and I think would be beneficial to the city to be considered. Dave?
And where do we stand compared to other cities? Do most other cities have that position?
Medium-sized to smaller cities, no. Be interesting. I don't know. We could find out for you. I don't know if Salt Lake has one or not. Has that, but we could check into that and see. I don't have an immediate answer for it.
I think it's a very intriguing idea. I think it's one of those things that sometimes it's hard to find, money for an additional position. But if this is done well, it can actually save us a lot of money and also provide some protection against problems down the line. And so I am very intrigued by that idea. I think with the blessing of the administration, I'd be very interested in you kind of fleshing out that idea and finding out some of those questions that have been asked and bringing it back for our consideration.
Okay, we will follow. We'll come back with a follow-up on it.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to turn the time over to Daniel Sofley, our Human Resources Division Director.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I was going through the questions that you wanted answered, and the first one is, what is your division doing to help the city achieve the goals listed in the general plan implementation section? Because of its responsibility, HR's responsibility to assist in the development of a highly trained, dedicated, and fairly compensated group of public employees, the HR division, I believe, is uniquely positioned to play a significant role in helping the city achieve many of those goals listed in the general plan, even if our activities do not appear to be specifically outlined in those goals. I did go through all 45 pages and did not find one that specifically referenced human resources or our efforts. But when you dig a little deeper, the goals that are there, we do play a role in those. For example, HR does not directly fight crime and reduce it in the neighborhoods, but we do contribute to that effort by establishing proactive recruitment strategies and competitive wage structures to ensure that we have qualified candidates for the position so we can send them out to help with assisting the crime in the neighborhood, or lowering crime. They're not assisting the crime. Our budget is primarily related to staffing, and we cover functions that are tied to the general plan. We also have not abandoned the Vision 2050 goals that were outlined in the previous year, because some of those were specific to ours, to have recruit and support quality employees and maintain a positive and safe workplace. That's one of the goals that we strive for. Our functions that we have to do this, we have payroll, we have our recruitment efforts, which includes outreach, pre-employment testing, our skill matching. As far as transparency, we post those positions for the public. We make sure that unless under extraordinary circumstances, that those are open and competitive, so that we can have our citizens apply for jobs and come to work for us as well. We do our employee benefits, medical, dental, retirement, workers' comp, our life insurances, our compensation, which consists of market comparisons. In addition to that, advancement policies. We have career series built in, how you get merit raises, where you bring people in at. Wellness programs we sponsor to encourage healthy lifestyles. We have performance appraisal systems so that our employees are held accountable for their actions and their performance and rewarded as such. We have employee training efforts, policy development, which are posted out on the internet for employees so that they can understand what standards that they're being held to. Also, a big component of what we do is employee relations. Unfortunately, that involves investigations, discipline, appeals of those actions, and so that we have a well-organized and disciplined workforce. Are there goals and objectives in the general plan where you feel like you could be doing more if given more budget? The one area in thinking about this that I felt like where HR could be more effective and do more is our efforts to train city supervisors on a variety of topics. If we had additional funding, could help in the following ways: manpower to not only track the training and to develop those courses, but also to deliver those trainings. We have increased our efforts in the last year Over the last several years, we added our Employees Essentials program, but we've also done additional training on certain payroll issues, developed a new harassment course that we will be rolling out here in the near future to all our employees. But we could also use additional funding to incentivize non-supervisors to take courses. There's a tendency at times to focus only on those holding those positions at the moment. My vision is to incentivize all of our employees to develop themselves, to be able to step into supervisory roles. Some of them may not feel the need to take those courses until they're in their roles. We would like to get them trained to get into those roles, and looking at ways to incentivize them to do that would be helpful. And then obviously there's a cost associated with course materials, making sure that we have current, up-to-date materials that people are not going to view and disregard because they look dated or old or anything like that.
Daniel?
Yes?
With that in mind, the training that you're giving, are we finding that we get trained people and then they leave to other higher paid positions? Are we getting, what's the percentage of turnover when you think about that on our jobs? That's hard to say maybe. Overall,
well, we do track it. I've been tracking it for the last 18 years that I've been here. Voluntary turnover, meaning covering the circumstances that you're talking about, we average about 6% annually. So 10% overall, but you have to also count that, fortunately or unfortunately, we will all age out of our positions, and 3% is a healthy to do that over a 30-year retirement plan. So about 6% is our voluntary turnover, which I would consider to be fairly low, considering the job market that we're in and how much easier it is to transfer jobs nowadays. So most of our people are going for higher level positions, or they're moving out of state, things like that. So I don't consider it to be a big problem.
In the city, but I think we do have that problem in the police department, don't we, from what I understand?
Turnover in there? Well, we've had a lot of retirements. We have had a few that have gone to other agencies as they get more aggressive in their efforts to recruit qualified people. The city is responding to that. If you remember, I was here last year. The council approved a sizable amount of money to up our compensation. That has obviously helped. Plus, we are in the process of developing an aggressive lateral program so that we can also target experienced officers that may be looking to make a move from their agencies.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's part of what we do as well. That's as far as trying to be aggressive in our recruitment strategies. As far as important needs being unfunded or underfunded in your department currently, I guess my answer to that is not at this time. The development effort that has gone into the HCM project for the Provo 360 project as it relates to human resources has put a significant strain on our ability to move forward with supervisor training. That's something that we need to continue to evaluate whether or not we need to add additional staff, perhaps temporarily, to help move that training forward or reduce the workload associated with the HR portion of that project. We have a staff of 8 full-time and 1 part-time, and we're all very heavily involved in that project. We did not receive supplemental money last year, and we're not requesting any at this time. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
The first question, going through the goals in the general plan, we have cited 5.411. Our webpage was recently updated to become more user-friendly. We added an online form that is currently working, and we're working on doing other online workflows and forms. 7.4.7, we have 4 full-time employees on staff that speak both English and Spanish. We also provide court-appointed interpreters to provide for criminal, traffic, and small claims hearings in any language requested or needed. We even will do that when they come in to talk with just a traffic clerk or someone at the counter if they're not comfortable we'll set up a time for them to come back when we can get an interpreter there. 7.4.3, we're open and receptive with citizens as they come to the Justice Court. Annually we do a customer service survey, and we've had high customer service scores in these surveys, and they continue to get better, which in our business we think is pretty impressive. And our focus on customer service through employee recognition is something I really try to work towards every year. Are there goals and objectives in the general plan where you feel like you could do more if given more budget? No, I feel like we are we have a sufficient budget right now. Do you see any important needs being unfunded or underfunded in your department currently? We would like to see a phone system upgrade this year to help manage and maintain the large amount of phone calls we have coming in. And then also, given the fact that we just negotiated our lease in our building, we would like to see some security glass put up at the front counter, which wasn't done when we initially moved in there. We haven't received any supplemental money last year or previous years, and the only request for this 2019-20 budget supplemental request would be for those 2 items I mentioned earlier. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Blackham, Facilities Services Manager. I'd like to touch on general plan, section 5.4.7, energy efficiency throughout Provo. In June 2018, Facilities was coordinated the installation of 3 new electric vehicle charging stations throughout the city, one here at the City Center, one over at the Rec Center, and one at the Academy Library. These units are utilized pretty much every day and serve a real need in Provo. We currently have applied with the state to get some grant funding for the Volkswagen grant that is currently being reviewed. What we'd like to do with that, and through the application, we'd like to look at getting funding for about 22 more electric vehicle charging stations to be placed throughout the city. That would be about $750,000 that we applied for. I talked to the state last week, and they hope to have some answers on the grant applications around early June of this year. So that's one we're looking forward to. We'd be very fortunate to get awarded some of that grant funding. We would look at possibly 4 new units here at the City Center, 3 new units over at the Rec Center, 3 new units at the library. Public Works, we put 2 new units over there. Over at the Provo Power Complex, there's an existing unit. We would add 2 new ones there. And then 4 different parks throughout the city that we would like to add 2 units at each, possibly Rock Canyon, North Park, Pioneer Park, and then Spring Creek, the new park out on South State Street. All these locations are situated along major highways and thoroughfares that are heavily traveled by both vehicle and pedestrians. This would help Provo reach a realistic goal for promoting energy efficiency throughout the city. It's also in line with Governor Herbert's State of the State address he gave a couple weeks ago as he promoted electric vehicle charging stations throughout Utah. So we're hoping we see some positive things on the funding. Second thing we're looking at energy efficiency is obviously with the construction of our new City Center Public Safety Building and our Fire Station 2. We built language in our RFPs to have that designed to ensure the new facilities would meet a high standard for energy efficiency and utilize sustainable building principles. They'll reflect creative design, community involvement, and cost consciousness. Construction dates, you're probably aware of Fire Station 2, we're looking at hopefully getting started second quarter of this year. And it'll be run for about a year of construction with a completion of second quarter 2020. And then the public safety building here, third quarter of this year getting started, and then around the fourth quarter of 2021 for completion dates. We've asked Scott Henderson to be here. Yes, Gary.
Can I ask a question about the fire station too?
Yes.
What do we do? That's a station that we don't have anything else on the north end, really. How do you deal with that? Or is it just?
I think Wayne and Fire Chief Miguel have talked about what some possibilities would be.
What's the question?
How do we work the transition? Because that station's going to be knocked down in the north completely.
So we will be putting a temporary facility up on Canyon Road, and we'll be relocating to, as we talk to the community in our presentations, we'll be relocating to about the 3800 block of Canyon Road to a temporary living quarters and a temporary apparatus bay, and that'll be there just for the time of the construction, and then we'll be moving in and then taking those facilities down.
So the 3800 is not owned by the city.
It is owned by the city.
It is owned by the city.
It's the area up on Canyon Road that they put the spring cleaning dumpsters.
Oh,
So
that's the
proposed
potential park.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
proposed park.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about when you say high standard, has there been discussion about exactly how high? I mean, are you looking at, I know we've talked a little bit in some of met with Don Jarvis and Austin Taylor and Isaac about, the cost of a LEED certification versus, say, a net zero kind of building or other kinds of, I'm just curious what kind of expectations are you hoping to get from the proposals you'll be looking at?
Yeah, and I think through the design process, I was saying that Scott Henderson's here. We've asked him to come if there's any questions on the city center project as well. That I hope through the design process we're going to look at LEED certifications of different degrees throughout and see as far as funding and money spent to do that from a basic standpoint, similar to what we did at the rec center when the construction was put together for that. A lot of the basic design would have the capabilities of addressing some of those degrees of the LEED certification. So that's really going to be tied in with the design early on. Scott, you have anything you could add to that?
No, I think it'll become clearer and more obvious when we bring on our architectural partner, and they'll be able to go over the options that are available, be it either LEED or some other new ones that have risen in the industry too. So I think we'll have a chance to have a discussion and really decide on what type of investment that we are going to be part of a program, or on the other spectrum is just make sure we utilize those principles in every aspect of the building and make sure it's a sustainable building.
And the conversation we've had is that the LEED certification may end up costing. I mean, I know the certification itself costs a lot of money. The newer development, maybe even since the rec center was built, is that they're now much more sophisticated with net zero construction. But I'm just hoping that that's at least on the table, that you're asking for proposals that would potentially address that possibility.
I think that a lot of those questions will be answered early on with the design team, I believe. So.
Thank you.
So other questions on the goals? Any more budget if we were given some budget for facilities? In the past, we've had a training budget that was the funding for that was cut several years ago. I think if we could get a new training budget put in facilities, I'm got a slight concern about our new buildings with much more state-of-the-art equipment and advanced systems that'll be put in these buildings that'll give us an opportunity to get some more specific training on some of those systems. I think that would help us throughout. We currently don't have any unfunded or underfunded projects. We didn't receive any supplemental money last year as well, so that's pretty much from facilities. Be glad to answer any questions you may have, or for me or Scott, about the building or any of the projects. Thank you.
Thank you.
So for the Recorder's Division, as far as goals that we are working on and things that we're doing to help the city meet the goals of the general plan, I identified just a few things. 7.4.3 talks about earning a reputation that we're easy to work with. One of the things I've done this last year is completely changed the grammar request process. Previously, you had to download a PDF form. You could either fill it out or type on it, and then eventually you print it and sign it and scan it and email it back, or you could fax it or mail it. It was just a little bit tedious, so I've changed that, and it's now purely online. It's just a web submission form. We are seeing a lot more requests. I don't know if this is why, unintended consequence, but it's a lot easier. It's automated. I can quickly affirm that I've received the request, and requesters know that it's been received, so that's been a great thing that we've done. 6.4.1 talks about local history, just raising awareness of our local history and culture. One of the great things I did this year was I got to inventory a time capsule that was at the cemetery. It was really neat. I went through everything. I made lists, took photos, and those are available and they can be shared online with the public, so people don't have to come in and touch these sensitive documents. We're working on doing the same thing with some of our older minutes books. I know Wayne and John had a chance to come and look at the vault. We have some really cool things, so if you haven't had a chance, feel free to stop in. But just amazing old minute books from the late 1800s, and we have Sanborn maps, if you know what that is. It's like a fire insurance map. So these are things that we're working with the archives to try to preserve. But we also want people to be able to see them, so we're working on digitizing, getting photos, scanning where we can, so that those are available on the internet. So that's been really fun to work on. Another thing we've done this year, as you know, we've converted from SIRE agenda management to OnBase. I think overall it was a pretty seamless process, but this is one of the ways that we've helped to enhance our communication with the public and get information out to the public. So Elizabeth and I are still meeting almost weekly. It seems to make tweaks and enhancements, but overall we feel it's been pretty smooth, so we're proud of that. Right now I don't see anything that's underfunded in my division. If given more budget, I don't see anything more I could do to really meet the goals and objectives in the general plan. I did get supplemental money last year. We hired our part-time record specialist, Janine Weiss, our former city recorder. She's back and she's working about 15 hours a week. And it has been the biggest blessing. It's been amazing what we've been able to accomplish. So we are keeping up with our grammar requests. We handled over 250 of those in the last year. That was up 267% from the previous year. Without her, I don't know that that would have been possible. And none of those were late. We did have to request additional time on some of the larger requests, but we were on schedule on all of those, so that was impressive. I'm also participating in the Provo 360 project with work management. Having Janine there has just been, it's allowed me to be able to participate, so I'm happy to be able to do that, and we're refocusing on our records management, as I mentioned before. So we're transferring some of these things to the state archives and preserving and scanning records and getting rid of those contracts that we've had forever that we don't really need anymore. So that's some of the things that we've been able to do with our additional funding. And yes.
That was a supplemental last year. Is this into the budget now? Is this something that we want to continue to do?
Yeah, so, yep, it is. It's there. And this year I'm not requesting anything. Do you have any questions for me?
We did show it as an ongoing supplemental request last year, so it would be, unless it was pulled, it would be included as part of this budget this year.
That's the first I had heard about the archiving and digitizing. That just sounds like a very exciting effort, and I just I applaud that, and just throw out some ideas. You know, I don't know if conversations with Josh Yost in community development, also just reaching out to some of the historical societies, groups. You know, they may have a lot of interest and expertise, and there might be some partnerships there as well.
That's a great point.
But I'm thrilled that that's taking place.
It's been fun, and I did speak with Josh. He has a lot of knowledge specifically about the Sanborn maps and things that relate to community development, and he suggested some of the archival societies that, like at the U, and so that is something that's a great idea. We'll continue to work towards that. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to be for you again. Apparently I get to be the needy child. As you guys all know, IT tends to be as hungry as possible. And going to innovate. A lot of those things are in technology. The first question that was asked, I'll just kind of mirror what Daniel said. I mean, as a support organization, most of what we do don't have a direct, but very much an indirect. But as I read a lot of the items you guys had out there, I really kind of saw a lot of themes around it. The first theme I saw was communications and information sharing, and that is something IT definitely brings to the table. Whether it's networking, internet, all the way down to our mapping services. So on the sheet there before you, I listed just a bunch of those services we provide on a daily basis. And I would say probably a good 95% of what IT does, no one ever sees. And that's the point, is it's just supposed to run and provide that architecture that all the businesses can be enabled to do the job they're doing. Whether it is on-base and the work that the guys be doing behind the scenes to make sure the database and servers are staying up, or the communications that stay up and reliable 24/7. Some of the more front-facing those things are definitely the mapping, though. If you look at the number of maps that the GIS team has been delivering out to the community over these past years, it's pretty impressive. And if you, I mean, even the most recent parkfinder.provo.org, which lets residents go and find parks around them and what kind of amenities those parks bring to the table, over to trash can internal type stuff, where when we rolled out the sanitation cans, they built out an application that allowed them to read RFIDs for the cans and display it on a map on how and where in the city we've already met and which areas we haven't gone to yet. Try to make sure we had the coverage and they were able to apply the crews to those right areas. So we bring a lot to the table in relation to communications and information sharing. The next theme I saw pretty heavily was sustainability. IT is very much in the state sustainability idea. We're active members on the internal sustainability teams. We're actively working on trying to get some air quality monitoring components from not just the off-the-shelf stuff, but we want to make sure it has the full sciences behind it. So we're working with DEQ on that. We're leaders in alternate community methods in IT. In fact, I would dare say we're probably still the highest user of UTA. We have people that bike full-time to work or even walk to work, and we use telecommuting where possible. So we definitely have those ideas in mind. I saw that as a direct alignment with some of the things I saw in the council's items. Being innovative and business-friendly. IT pretty much brings a lot of innovative things to the market. So whether it's Pro 360 or attacking the digital divide on down to even a drone program we initiated these past 2 years. And we recognize even the drone program can be kind of out there, maybe even cause consternation in some areas, but we recognize that people are flying drones. And we as a community need to be ready to take care of the good side and the bad side of that coming in. So we've got some pretty innovative programs in those areas. The last theme that I saw in there was definitely safety, and whether it's cybersecurity stuff that we're working on that you guys have hopefully all been part of this last year, whether it's the training or some of the tool sets we brought into the table. And that's probably the answer to that first question. Next one, are there goals and objectives in the general plan where you feel you can do more if given more budget? Investment in IT always pays back. And there's very few goals that you guys have that there isn't some component of that has a technology aspect that allows it to be out there. And that's in force multipliers. But we definitely see areas in just basic staffing needs from a public safety analyst, which we're looking to present, and the chief is here from fire, and I know the police chief also supports this. There is need for headcount in supporting the force multipliers that have gone into service over these past years. We're going on, I think, 6 years with doing work on consolidation of resources from the initial cuts from years past, and we have made tremendous advances with the staff we have. But the environment is very hungry for the other force multipliers. I mean, frankly, if I go back 6 years, the network would go down once a week. There wasn't wireless in these facilities. Tablets weren't a thing. The public safety tool sets were, 6 systems this last year, right, Chief? Alone. So we're adding a lot of technology to the environment, so we're going to be asking for resources in those areas. Next, do I see...
Can I ask, it's kind of a crazy question.
Please.
You asked for technology updates. Are those saving, do you see a lot of savings because of the technology that we're implementing? So are we balancing on some of those things, or is just to survive we have to put these things in?
Definitely a little bit of all of the above. Typically we see a lot of technology that's a force multiplier, but sometimes we forget how we're going to support it. All right, so we buy a technology stack, but then when it comes time to actually get the full value out of the tech stack, it takes the analyst and the people that are reviewing and pushing it forward, or to even support it when it goes down. we tend to miss part of that. So what ends up happening is IT takes on a lot of technology stack load. What we end up doing is we have a set amount of resource. We end up reducing and reducing and reducing. And the way I would put this, if you've seen those drawings of the artist where they give them the 10-second challenge, where they draw a drawing in 10 seconds, they draw in a minute and draw it in 10 minutes, and the differences. Well, what we tend to do is we take this technology stack and we say, hey, IT, you got 10 seconds to deliver. And they do a great job at that. But in certain cases, you probably want at least the 10-minute one, right? So it's a matter of aligning it right. So if you have a system, let's say like City View is one of the examples on the list. We want to get more value out of it. Why don't we try to resource that up? You don't have to as administration, right? It's just a matter of at what level do you want to get the value out of the tech stack that you're currently running. Does that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah. So do you see important needs being unfunded or underfunded in your department? Well, we're good. Yes. The appetite, like I said, for technology is greater than we can currently provide in IT. We're okay where we're at. We're not saying you have to, but we are definitely recommending that we increase some IT. Cybersecurity is one of those areas. Came last year, and it's actually one of the areas I'll talk about in a second. I think we made some good strides with the investment that this council gave us last year. And we're going to be asking again, and we'll keep asking, and hopefully we'll get it at some point in the future when we can afford to invest in that. We see there's some other needs in things like project management or even just web services development work. We can do more given more resource, but we also recognize that it's our job to ask, and we know you have to balance it with some very difficult other challenges, and we're comfortable with the kitchen talk where we can't always fund wants and needs. We have to define at your level what those needs really are and fund the right things at the right time. If we receive supplemental money, so we did receive $50,000 last year for cybersecurity initiatives. How many in the room got a chance to participate in the training that was provided for social engineering? Just raise the hands. So we made it available for the entire city. We do have recordings online. We're going to go ahead and make sure that all city resources that come in are trained to social engineering tactics related to whether it's spam coming in and people are at clickbait or Trojan or spear phishing attacks and all those other technical things they're doing to try to get into our systems and expose us. So the training went across, I would say, tremendously well. We've had nothing but good compliments surrounding the training. We've had people way more knowledgeable about what types of things are coming in, and they're actually coming to IT saying, we want more of this because we can see where we need to defend ourselves. So we will likely just continue to be asking for additional resources that we can turn around and provide those resources to them. But if you look at the actual result in that list, we removed over 540 security vulnerabilities across 240 systems this last year with that funding. We trained our team and they're better prepared. And that alone was worth the investment. I mean, that's a pretty massive amount of security vulnerabilities we had that we didn't know about last year. And with that, a little bit of tools and a little bit of training, we're able to reduce our threat level by a significant amount. Now, I'd love to go into more details on that, but as you guys know, when you're talking cybersecurity, there are points you don't want to make it as public. They do need to go to a closed session, and I would invite you guys, if you're interested in that, to please let us know. We'll happily come and talk to you in a closed session about what our current threat vulnerability levels really are. We also had a radio placement project. I'm sure the chiefs will be talking to you about that, but I did want to highlight that they did have that money. We've been collaborating with those departments, and that radio project is on track. We have had some delays in some of the delivery of the units from the vendors, but we're on track to get those handsets and in-car radios handled. We also had another form of funding coming through the Innovation Fund through the administration. We were able to prove out a pilot project with the airport badge access system. In order to meet FAA regulations, we were required to allow them to rapidly disable access to the site to improve the security standards of the badge access system. And we were able to do that on time, on budget, and on scope. And it's definitely proving as a great model for our future facilities so that we can improve the physical security of the facilities. We did a drone project. It was also one of those areas. And definitely, if you haven't had a chance to see some of the work they've been doing there, it's pretty impressive. Great applications for our public safety. Great applications for us to get construction visibility from above, even just parks, being able to do the flyovers of the parks and show residents where they're actually at, where the just basically market the great tools that we have. And then emergency GIS go back, and that's the idea of, hey, when our EOC does go and operate, we want the GIS teams there and ready to be able to provide the mapping services, which lets them apply the right resource to the right area. Are there other requests related to the budget? Well, I've already kind of talked about that, but I do highlight in the goals, I tried to map these to what was in the plan. And one of those areas was Safe City. And it's our strong sense of security and well-being, well-trained and equipped staff. That goes back to the public safety staff augmentation. We need more technology staff supporting officers and firefighters in the field and being able to help them with the technology that they're using as a force multiplier. We need cybersecurity resources, so we'll be asking for that. Multi-factor authentication. This is a security area we'd definitely like to see again, so we've submitted this a couple of times. This year we'll definitely be a lot more formal with that request, but it's enhancing our passwords. Instead of it being just a password everyone changes every 90 days, we would like to see that like you would see with your banks. You're used to seeing that, where you have a multi-factor where it understands, sends your message to your phone, and has some kind of a key pass to make it a little bit more secure, and also hopefully make it so you don't have to remember passwords as often, which most people will typically just write down. Okay. Education was another big one in those areas. Access to and use of information technology definitely screamed to me. Say, hey, I have a better answer to that one. But we're working on things with automation tools to make sure our websites and other areas have, meet ADA compliance and QA sets, so that we don't have broken links on our site. Because there's nothing more embarrassing than you listing information out there, someone clicks on it and takes them nowhere. So we want to make sure our website and the information we're sharing has a high quality, and it also meets the standards of the ADA community. We also want to see an advancement on Office Suite and email standards. Microsoft has really pushed towards Office 365 as their platform, and a lot of the old licensing models start to move away. They are moving to cloud options, and as we look at the investment in our staff out there, it's at roughly $13.80 a month for our staff to have access to the full tool suite, and we would like to see that as a proposal where we just take care of it instead of doing it the way we're currently doing. So there'll likely be a proposal on that. Next area is business and economic vitality. Definitely, as we talk about what the future of Provo looks like, we'll have a lot of supplementals, which I don't know what the appetite looks like, but as IT, we want to show you guys where we are thinking about the future of the city, so we'll be submitting some that you guys can decide if it's appropriate to engage on these or not. But from autonomous vehicles, where there's some great ideas from our GIS community and teams talking about what about an automated shuttle service out in the parking areas by BYU, where we could probably take care of some of those problems with some of the technology you're seeing in other cities. And we have to decide as Provo, do we want to be leading in these technology areas, or do we want to be following, and how far do we want to be following behind? But autonomous vehicles are a thing, and they're coming. How far do we want to get in advance of that? So we expect to be submitting a supplemental on ways we can start that process. With membership fees into some of the local communities, BYU has a great program related to autonomous vehicles. We want to get engaged with them. The drone program growth, and of course smart city initiatives, where we can start using intelligent devices throughout our city to collect data that helps us manage the city better. Whether it's air quality sensors throughout the city to identify where there's a potential emissions problem, to traffic sensors or other areas that allow the city to use smart devices to help us collect and make good decisions on the data that they have available. Next is responsible government, and this is just the idea that for us, we want to make sure that the services we are providing are always up to date. And one of the biggest areas we have there is in aerial imagery and GIS resources. We have a lot of data coming through, and I know there's been a supplemental out for years past. We're going to continue that, but we'd like somebody that can actually do the data entry, the zoning updates, the permits, and the other areas to bring to bear the mapping and have it have accurate current information rather than the current several weeks or even months of time as our GS resources are tied up into another project, but have somebody that can actually maintain those changes in a more timely manner. With that, that's the quick version of my presentation. Is there any questions? Yes?
Question about the air quality monitors.
Yes.
Are these the purple monitors? Is that what they're called?
Yeah, so yes, they're one of the vendors out there,
okay.
Purple Monitor. So with them, they do collect data in addition. Obviously, that's why they offer the service they do. That's one component, but it's also only one part of the air quality issue. So if you're just looking for the large particulates, that'll work just fine. But that's not the only issue with air quality. So we want to work with DEQ to also get a more rich sensor set where they can use the full sciences to come to bear to find out where those emissions are happening. So do we change just low NOx requirements in our city for, you know, our water heaters? That could change a massive amount of the air quality problem in our city. And some of the data, could that help us with that? Well, I don't know that that's actually enough information off of the purple devices.
So is this money that the state is offering to provide cities this service, or I guess I'm not clear, and obviously we're not looking at a detailed budget yet, but are you talking about the city spending money on this, or what?
I think it's a little bit of a mix. In other cities around us, they've had partners like Utopia actually funded ORMs, and they went out in all of their areas as they delivered that. I know that they're talking with our Google partners to see if they're interested in participating in that. In the end of the day, if they're not interested in that, we'll at least put them on our city facilities, whether it's that one or a DEQ monitor device.
I think it could be very enlightening and be very helpful.
Well, yeah, even before someone does a sports event, it'd be nice to know if it's actually healthy to do so.
Josh, I see $50,000 last year. Thank you for your report on how you spent that. Numbers, I know you're still working on budget. What does it look like for supplemental? Is it going to increase more than 50 as a supplemental? Because these are not ongoing. What do you look?
I will. When I submit it, I'll do the homework. I would suspect it's going to be similar to last year, and I don't have it right in front of me.
But close.
It'll be 2 positions, and those positions, I know the last year's question was, what are those fully loaded? Well, they do range, and it's between $62,000 and $97,000 fully loaded, based on the level of position. I would anticipate one that's more of a senior and one that's more of a person that works with that individual to do the actual cybersecurity.
So that's a supplemental, and that's positions, but how about you went through a list of other things, it sounds like, that are on the supplemental.
Well, with cybersecurity, I think we took care of the tools portion of that this year. Clearly, they'll probably need additional tools because, as we know, the threats are constantly changing. There might be new tool sets that they would need. I would say that just having the people alone for this next year would be the right approach. And then as they do the initial analysis with the tools that we already own and have, but with that dedicated resource, they'd be able to tell us how we can better utilize money. So that way we're not just going out and buying tools that we don't actually need. I would suggest, though, that the multi-factor component that we're going to have a little bit of as a richer tool is a security investment, and we need to get those and get those over to you as well. So that would be a tool more on ease of use and security, while the actual resources is specific to cybersecurity and auditing our cybersecurity controls.
Thank you.
Any others? Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Any other questions for administrative services? I will make one note. We checked, and Salt Lake City does have an internal audit department.
Division
There's a division. There's like 4 positions there. I did a quick look at a couple of other larger cities in the state. Couldn't see it, but we'd like to do a little deeper dive and let you know. That's just kind of a heads up.
Thank you. And thank you for the well-prepared presentations. That was very efficient and very informative. And, I think we pride ourselves in the quality of services that we provide our residents, and really get the feel that you're the department or the department that really helps us to provide those services. So thank you for it.
Thank you.
You're ended on time. Absolutely appreciate that as well. And so we won't blow it just chatting. We will move on to item 3. A discussion regarding an appropriation for additional police department expenses. Mr. Graybaugh, our budget officer, is presenting this. We have a full 3 minutes budgeted to this. 3 minutes for the next and 4 for the one before. We will see all of these tonight, so we can ask deeper questions that we needed in tonight's meeting, but we felt like it'd be good to at least present it here.
Correct. I just intend to kind of share the impetus behind each of these 3 items. Yes.
If I could just pause, I would like to, and he has not stepped out. I was going to acknowledge Mr. Parker, who has joined us, Mr. Paxman, who's joined us, and Councilor Connect, who has joined us, and I'm sure Mr. Parker will be back in, but thank you.
Yes. So the first item, the appropriation for additional police officer expenses, are related to the loss of Officer Shinners. and some of the expenses associated with the funeral and vigils and other activities and expenses associated with that. It totals just over $26,000 of items that were not originally intended to be part of the police department's budget. And so this appropriation would reimburse the expenses that they've already paid out for that event. If there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer it. Also forward council staff the itemized list of those expenses.
If I might just add for council's benefit, I heard from the police chief this afternoon that UVU actually waived all of its fees for the funerals. It was a very generous thing that they did for the city.
Thank you, Fred.
This is an appropriation out of the general fund.
It would be using general fund balance to add budget to the police department to cover these expenses.
Thank you.
If there's no questions, we can move on to the next item. The next item is, I believe, the appropriation for the, should have checked which order they're in. Is it the bond one that's next?
It's the bond.
The airport bond? Or the city facilities? Okay, so the city facilities one. You notice this includes $72 million. This is the budget portion of the bond issuance that we had already issued. So we've issued a little over $69 million. This includes an additional about $2 million of interest expected to be gained over the next through fiscal 20. Just through holding those funds, that will gain about $2 million of interest on $70 million. And so this should provide us sufficient budget to survive the life of the project, and then as we get closer to the end, we can provide any kind of true up that we need to for any remaining balance or outstanding balance related to those bonds. This, by appropriating it now, we're able to start on work for the new facilities and start paying for the architects and other aspects of the job. And also, it helps if we don't do it part of our annual budget process for comparability reasons, because otherwise our budget will shoot up by $70 million this for fiscal 20 compared to fiscal 19, and we felt like this kind of helps us identify it as a unique circumstance that it really is.
What is the $240,000 for the debt service fund?
The debt service fund is going to pay for the cost of issuance, and so those come also out of the bond proceeds, and so that amount should cover the portion that we pay to the people who helped us facilitate in the sale of those bonds. John's also here to answer any questions if you have any more specific about those bonds and the process there. So if not, the final appropriation is also bond related. It's related to the airport revenue bonds that were approved related to the construction and infrastructure upgrades at the airport. This is something that could have been included in the fiscal 19 budget, but because these are expenditures from the bond proceeds, they were overlooked. So this appropriation would allow us the budget authority to spend the money that we already have from those bond proceeds to pay for an interest payment in this fiscal year. And future payments will be included in the fiscal 20 and so on budget as we pay those portions out of the airport fund. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Dustin, this is what normally would have been a tax increment bond, except we used the sales tax as the backstop.
Right.
But the revenue is coming from the tax increment generated by Duncan.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I would it's more of an administrative thing. We should have included in the budget, and we just missed it. So we apologize for that.
No, thank you. I'll look forward to speaking to you tonight about this.
Yeah, that was very impressive and very good. Thank you for that. Didn't follow along that, covered items 3, 4, and 5. So we will now move to item 6, a discussion on the proposed expansion of Provo City Airport. This will be led by our Deputy Mayor, Mr. Isaac Taxman, and we have 10 minutes budgeted for this.
Thank you. And in the agenda it says information only. Actually tonight you'll be asked to support a resolution in connection with this. So I'll just tell you briefly what that entails. I got to kind of give you some background in case you haven't heard all of this. So recently the airport received FAA sort of green light to go ahead with the terminal and a grant to help pay for the apron, the concrete apron in front of the terminal. It's money that's to be used only if we're going to have a terminal, and we've got about 2 years to see to it that that's happening. So we were looking at this as an administration and looking at what the cost of a terminal would be, and we said, well, we probably can't do the 10 gates. What if we do just a little core terminal, just a little
cube that could later have wings attached to it, sort of hallways attached to it with extra gates to be built on later. And we looked at the budget numbers and everything, and then we decided we probably need to go to the state to ask for some money. And as we first talked with a few legislators, one of them said, "The hair on my arms is standing up as you're talking." That was the kind of reaction we got from almost everybody we talked to. They said, "This is a great project. We would love to help with this." We created a couple little flyers, and over the weekend had lobbyists calling us saying, you know, we've had legislators reaching out to us saying, "Go help Provo with this because we want to help this." And so there's been a lot of, it's almost felt like people, you know, almost falling over each other to try to help this. And that's been an amazing experience because from what we've gathered, that's not the normal experience when you're asking for money. But it's been great. House Majority Leader Francis Gibson has stepped up to sponsor this appropriation request. He presented at the committee hearing that we held, as did Mayor Kafusi. And we have engaged a lobbyist, and we're happy with their work. And one of the pieces of feedback we've heard repeatedly is it needs to be clear to the state that they're sort of the last dollars in, that everything else is secure. And so the administration has come up with a plan, and I don't know, Hannah, if you received the email to
the packet that you
the
sent.
packet?
It's right behind you.
Great. So if we can scroll down a few pages.
Near the bottom.
Near the bottom, we've got a little budget list. These are some pictures of what the type of thing we could be looking at, and there's some plans that we could certainly spend another time. Oops, we're on the wrong orientation there, but hopefully we can flip that. The long and short of it is the city can bend over backwards to move some infrastructure money. And by the way, we have Dave Decker and Brian Torgerson here who can answer questions for us. But we looked at it and we thought we can do a lot to help with infrastructure. And so we can shift some money that was, you know, allocated for other things, maybe CIP money, but we could shift it to help support this project and come up with some significant funding from Provo City side. We also gave ourselves, you know, the value of the land that we're putting in and factored that into our contribution. We also realized that with that quarter-cent sales tax money coming in, we don't want to use all of it for this, but we thought we could use some of that to help pay back a loan that we could take from the Energy Department to get an extra shot in the arm here. All in all, Provo City's contribution, if you count the land value, the infrastructure that we would put in, and some extra dollars from that quarter-cent sales tax that will be coming in July, would come to about $19 million total. The ask from the state is for $9 million, and we've asked the county, and by the way, when we discussed this with the county commissioners, again, widespread support, enthusiasm for it. They said, let's get this in front of our TRCC board. They talked about possibly calling a special session of their board meeting so that they can get it done before the legislative session, so that we can get an additional, we can maybe scroll down a little bit more, an additional $4 million, basically $4.3 million from the county is our what we're hoping we can get from them. And if we can lock that piece in, the whole point of this resolution is really just to show legislators that Provo City's side is nailed down. So the resolution essentially states, we've reviewed the administration's proposal, we're supportive, and stand ready to help see it happen. So at this point, any questions?
Yes.
Okay, George.
Due to those CIP funding, wastewater, city water, storm water, looks like we're taking money out of the CIP there. Is that money that will be slow down those projects?
Yes.
Is that smart?
Yes. Glad you asked. We think so. We think the time is right for this. And you know, you've got $8 million in the hopper from the federal government. That may not come again. And so, you know, to let that slip just seems like it'd be a poor decision. Is part of the thinking we have. But yes, absolutely. And I think, you know, if we need to, we could talk about what those other projects are that will have to be put aside while we prioritize this.
One of those is the sewer treatment plant, obviously. What is it going to do to that? They're taking $4 million? No. Wastewater, $2 million.
No, it's not. Heads are shaking from.
It's not the plant. So the wastewater funding would come from pipe projects on the west side. So we have scheduled pipe projects, primarily what I've been calling the backbone of of the future collection system out on the west side. So we would delay some projects, would shift projects around. So instead of doing the airport later in the CIP, we're going to slide it earlier and have to exchange another project that's earlier. So then we'd just end up having to flip-flop some projects around on the west side.
Related to that, how will that affect our schedule to allow developers projects on those?
It could make a difference in that.
It could also help, depending on where that line ends up going.
Yeah.
It could service a large portion of that, what, from 2450 west to 3110. So it could actually help it as well, but it may help it in some areas and delay it in others.
I think Dave Kinnick was first, sorry, and then Gary.
So, if everyone's excited about it, they're probably excited about it from different perspectives. And it'd be interesting to know what, I mean, we have our vision. What's their vision? Why are they so excited about us doing this?
Yeah, I can try to speak to that, unless you want to.
No,
first.
go ahead. You go ahead, and I'll chime in after.
You know, just from the viewpoint of Sundance, from the Utah Valley Convention Center, from the viewpoint of hotels here, there's been a study done, and the estimates show, and help me out here, Brian, but that there's about a $15 million annual revenue impact to a community for every daily flight out of an airport of this sort of size. So, you know, I don't know how they get to the bottom of that, but it's about $15 million increase in revenue that a community sees for each daily flight annually. And this will certainly enhance our number of daily flights, or at least it's calculated to. So I think there's the economic development point of view. There's the keeping cars off the I-15 point of view. Projections are that it'll take an hour and a half to get from Provo to Lehigh, or even to Point of the Mountain in a couple decades. So keeping roads off the I-15 and allowing an option here. I've heard one of the legislators say, I'm just excited that I can live my whole life in Utah County. I will never need to go to Salt Lake. With the UVU's new entertainment center and some of the other features, that this now has become a community that I never need to drive around the Point of the Mountain. And the airport would certainly help that. Anyway, so those are some of the points I'm hearing. Gary?
As I think about what happened in Mesa when that airport went down there, even with Allegiant, the small, what have they got? 10 gates down there?
I don't know. About 10 gates.
Yeah, and the economic impact that airport has created within that area and the growth. Mesa's and Phoenix area is one of the fastest growing areas in the world, actually, as far as size goes. And I think that airport has a substantial impact on that. How many terminals were we looking at for this?
This would be 4 gates.
Four gates. And so as we go with that 4 gates, is this something we'd start immediately with 4, or is it something that we would transition like the treatment plant, add on to it?
I think the intent would be to start with 4, and then we would expand eventually to 10, which is the master plan, more than 20 years, the long-term master plan for the airport. So this gives you a little sense. So phase 1 would be the purple side, which would include 4 gates, and then the ancillary services, TSA, baggage handling, concessions, car rental, those kinds of things. And then the wings out to the side would then create opportunity for the additional gates as demand increased.
But the plan is that this has enough capacity for baggage claim, for TSA, for everything.
For 10 gates.
So we don't have to go back in and redo and do more space. It's kind of ready to roll, as all we have to do is build these out.
As I look at the experience that's going to happen, the experience that you're going to have at Salt Lake with that airport compared with the experience, so many people will much rather fly into Provo rather than have to deal with what they'll be dealing with in Salt Lake at some point.
Well, even at full build out on this, we're talking about disrupting less than 5% of the total population effect, or the people who fly out of Salt Lake International. So this is not something that Salt Lake, at least it is indicated, they feel threatened about at all. In fact, they see it as an advantage. You know, we're not going to fly Delta out of here, at least under the current scenario. Why would Delta bifurcate their market? But we do open the door for others who might have a much more difficult time and particularly have greater expense getting into the Salt Lake Airport. And we could help nurture some of that, you know, those alternative flights. And maybe, so maybe this does end up with a United or an American running a few flights east and west, and could be a startup airline that might have an interest in coming to Provo that would never ever be able to afford to go into the Salt Lake International. So our hope is that it creates, it raises, you know, it's the rising tide lifting all boats of air travel in the metro area.
1/4% to pay back the energy fund. That's the transportation funding, so you can use it for airport as well as
Yes,
roads?
you can use it for airport.
You just had an email today wanting $100,000 a year for safer streets, so that's the same quarter.
It is.
So it's gonna make less available for other things.
That's true, it will.
Because we gotta be sure we pay the energy fund back.
Absolutely, no. If we did that, it would be an interfund loan, and we would establish the terms, you know, with the council, and we would just set it up to repay over a set period of time.
As long as there's a secure way to pay it back, I'm 100% in favor of using that.
That's the way it would have to be done.
That's a good way to use that fund balance.
Yeah. And that's the only new money really that Provo City would be looking to spend on this. And it's only a portion of what that 1/4% would be. Did you calculate that roughly, Wayne, about how much percentage of the 1/4% revenue we'd have to use as a regular, maybe that depends on the terms of the loan, but
yeah,
it certainly wasn't half.
Nowhere close to half. I think it was more like 15 to 20%, if I remember the number right, as we try to look at it.
Of the 1/4% new revenue would be dedicated to this.
Yeah. So we are getting low on time. Yep. You're fine. We'll go with one more question. We will see this tonight, and we will have more opportunity to discuss it tonight.
So it's sort of a two-part question. One is maybe for Dave Decker, something that you said some time ago now kind of has haunted me about the potential conflict of birds and planes. If we're going to build out the airport to a point where we're going to run some public safety risks about airport travel, I'm a little concerned about that. The other issue is related to the development, the West Side Development Plan. In my recollection of that plan, I can't think of any reason why this would be a problem, but I'm just posing the question, is there something about the development and expansion of an airport that is not factored into the West Side plan, because people are not going to want to live near an airport? So that some of the idea that we're sort of developing that southern area, which is not that far away from here, if we're talking about building that and trying to build the airport at the same time, I'm wondering if we're at cross purposes with ourselves. So those are the two questions that are...
I think one thing to consider is that the area immediately west, or sorry, immediately east of the airport is set aside for future airport commercial type stuff, not residential stuff. So there's a pretty big buffer on that side. And then to the north, there are already...
What does airport commercial mean exactly?
I got the wrong zone, but it's not meant for residential.
But if it's expansion of the airport, isn't that still bringing the airport closer?
We're not changing the footprint of the airport. Beyond existing land we already own.
In fact, if you go back to the presentation that Steve gave a couple of weeks ago, we're eliminating our cross runway in our master plan, which actually helps a ton. So all of our traffic is actually out over the lake. So if anything, it gets better over time as far as residential goes.
And I think the West Side plan, we had quite a bit of conversation with community development. They may be better, posed to answer the question that you're specifically asking, but the future of the airport was part of that conversation, the development of the West Side plan. So I think the neighborhoods have been told, I think everybody's kind of anticipated, hey, there's going to be a terminal that will increase some commercial traffic immediately adjacent to the airport, so immediately across the Lakeview Parkway that you can see on that map is where the airport-related zone, much of it is owned by either, the land is either owned by the Hinckley family or BYU, and then adjacent to that, east of that, is where there's been a discussion about the regional park. So, so residential homes being close, they're quite some distance from the airport.
About the birds, do you have any thoughts?
So there is an ongoing conversation. There still is some concern about the Delta Restoration Project, and clearly we have some some inroads that we need to make with the State Mitigation Commission and Central Utah Water on that. That hasn't been forgotten, and we clearly need some resolution there.
And I will just interject one thing, and that is, and I don't remember who I was discussing this with, but the whole idea of the delta restoration, part of it is that it's going to be designed to avoid flocking flocks of birds. And so whether it's the slope and everything else about it is going to be designed to try to avoid flocks of birds. And I don't know much about that other than what I just told you, but that's part of what I've heard. I think we're out of time, but it's up to you.
More questions for tonight. I got a couple
Great,
more.
questions for tonight. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waxman. Obviously, there's a lot of interest from the council and all regarding this. We did lose some of our headway on this. We'll try to move along. I would like to welcome the mayor.
I apologize.
It's great. We know you've got important things that you're handling as well. So we will jump now to item 7, a discussion on the use of the surplus property list. I believe that this is speaking, we're going to be looking at kind of 4 different areas that we may add to that. And we will look to Ms. Riddle. Thank you. Already up and ready to go. Appreciate that. Management analyst. I thought also our property.
There's about 5 different titles, but yeah.
Lots of things. Appreciate what you do for us. So take it away.
Great. So during the last council study session, Brian talked a little bit about the importance of the surplus property list and how it should be managed and handled. One thing that he pointed out is that in order for us to discuss the possible sale of property, the actual specific terms, the property already needs to be surplused. And so I've kind of taken an initial swipe at some properties that we've already had offers on, or properties that we internally have talked about going ahead and surplusing because we've already identified them as pieces that we don't need that could be marketed. The first one we're going to talk about is a 39-acre parcel that's located up at the mouth of the canyon. This is located directly north of the Indian Hills Trailhead. This particular piece we talked about back in 2016 about surplusing, and we had different council members then. Since then, we actually do have a purchase agreement on this property with the caveat that anything that, the terms and things would be approved by the council. So this is one parcel that we would like to discuss in closed session, but in order to do that, we would need to first get it put on the surplus property list. With all of these properties, we do an internal audit and have all of the departments review the parcel, make sure there isn't any future plan for them, that they wouldn't have any concerns with us surplusing it. This has been through that process, and we've deemed it property that should be surplused. So I'll just go through these one by one. So are there any questions on this one specifically? If not, I'll move on to the next one.
Do you have an address about for that Indian Hills?
It's like 5200 North Canyon Road. If you know where the substation is.
Right, okay, gotcha.
You should have had maps with your packet.
We did have maps with that packet, thank you, and yeah, if you could pull up the visuals, it's very helpful to kind of see that.
I'm not seeing a GIS map available.
I think there's and I think there's an exhibit to the resolution that has the maps on it.
That may be the easiest.
That's already put up.
Here we go. Okay, so the trailhead is located right here. Here's 8th North and Orem. So there's the hillside. When you drive into 8th North, you basically come to a cliffside. This is on the top of that. So it's 39 acres, pretty hilly, probably not easily developed, although we've got someone with some grand ideas. So that's the first parcel. The second piece is just under 18 acres. This is known as our Buckley Draw property. It consists of 3 parcels that we own, and we're currently negotiating with the property owner for this little piece here. So hopefully we'll get that picked up in the next month or so. This property we've been holding on to for a while because it does have some drainage issues that would need to be addressed during any kind of development. We've also been talking to the adjoining property owner, which is owned by the Schofields, about possibly doing something together so we can address some of those issues, kind of moving retention basins and things on their property as well as ours to make it so we can develop this eventually. The next piece is the former shooting range. This is located just south and east of the State Mental Hospital. It's right at the corner of 3rd South as it turns into Slate Canyon Drive. It's part of a bigger parcel, so we kind of shaved off the area that we thought would be the most developable and that isn't being used as anything recreational. So that just under 5 acres, about 4.5 acres. We are currently doing an environmental study on this to make sure that we don't need to do any kind of corrective work for possible lead that's on the property from the shooting range. So we actually are using some brownfields fund to have all of that testing done, so no cost to us. And we hope to have those results here quickly. And then the last parcel, this is just south of the new Spring Creek Park, right next to the substation that's been there for many years, just on 1320 South. When we acquired the property for the future expansion of the road that will be coming on the west side of the substation, we ended up with some remnant property. Plus the substation, we'll be planning on expanding, but they'll still have property left over. So we'd be looking at surplusing pretty much all of this to the west and a little strip to the north. We have had a couple of people approach us about this property as well. So by putting it on the surplus property list, we can probably start actively marketing this piece as well. And that's the parcels that we're going to start with. Are there any questions?
As we market those, we're surplusing it, where does the council, is it a $50,000 limit on the sale?
All of these would be eventually coming back to you.
They'd have to come back. Is it $500,000, $500,000? Okay.
It is, but there's a specific provision, because we're deviating from our past practice of how we're using the surplus property list at this point. The resolution, or the proposed resolution specifically requires for all of these council approval of the actual terms, regardless of the value.
Okay.
So this first action would just be putting the property on the surplus property list, and then once we get ready to actually sell, we'd be bringing the terms back to you.
And that happens in closed session?
It can, or we can do it.
I'm just curious about.
Usually the presentation, usually the initial presentation happens in closed session, but only if, under state law, disclosing the details would prevent the transaction from being accomplished on the best possible terms, and only if the terms are later revealed to the public before final action.
So does that make this not the appropriate time to talk about like community land trust issues and what, or is that for closed session?
I'll leave that to somebody who knows how that affects the property of the value of the property. But to the degree that having those discussions reveals information that would prevent the city from getting the best deal that they can with taxpayer property, then it would be appropriate to have in a closed session.
Thank you very much. All right, we will now go to policy items referred from the Planning Commission. Item 8 is an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 0.96 acres of real property generally located at 1356 South 5th West from residential agricultural to residential R18. So in the Lakewood Neighborhood, and Mr. Ardmore, our planner, will present this, and we do have 5 minutes.
Okay, that'll be fine. So this is just a simple infill development. There's currently a home here fronting 500 West. This rear portion of her property she wants to subdivide into 2 lots. The R1 zoning would now allow that since regulations for lot size and width were adjusted last year. And that's what this one has been waiting on, is those adjustments. Went through Plan Commission. Interesting bit with this one is that a couple of the neighbors had questions about building height or concerns with building height, referencing the development that happened to the south of there. The applicant has proffered to keep the homes to 2 stories once we get to that point. We talked about maybe putting that on the plat as a note on the plat. However, the concerns were more with the grading of the lots, whether they can bring fill in, and what that final height would be. That's still up in the air. The R1 zone maxes out at 35 feet in height. So maybe that's something that will come up tonight in discussion, is those neighborhood concerns. But again, the applicant has proffered that we can make that note on the plat when that process comes through.
And 35 feet, is that the average length of the curb and gutter, or where does that 35
so
feet
that's
start?
measured from average grade up to the midpoint of the roof.
Average grade of the whole lot, so like if I'm measuring a curb and gutter, if the curb and gutter's up here and go down, it takes the middle point.
Of the actual lot, so the
Of the
curb and
actual
gutter aren't on the lot.
No,
so
of the actual.
of the grade
grade
around the
itself.
home. Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't the concern is so many, well, a lot of those developments had to bring fill in.
Right.
So the basement's really half out of the ground.
Right.
And
so holding it to 2 stories might not.
Is the 35 feet going to be from the ground still?
Yeah, from the average grade it's 35
So they'll
feet.
have 2.5 stories they have to get within that 35 feet. And are they already addressing that, or is that what he's saying?
It's too early to really address that. There's no home plans or anything, but to try to quiet some of these concerns, the applicant has offered to make a note on the plat as that plat process comes in after this. Not sure if that will help.
I like the continuation of the sidewalk, but I think that's a good addition.
Yeah, it'll really help that 570 West Street. Yep.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Item 9, an ordinance amending Provo City Code Section 1414E 32 to remove the maximum density restriction in the campus mixed use zone. It's a citywide impact everywhere there's campus mixed use. And Mr. Josh Yost, city planner, will be presenting. Our Bill Pepperoni will do some pinch hitting, and we have 5 minutes budgeted for this.
So these are the other provisions in the zone that end up impacting or influencing density. The largest one on the list, the largest one that has the largest impact, is parking, loading, and access. Your parking ratio and parking standards do more to address building density, and then building height after that would be those would be the 2 biggest ones. In the downtown zones and the ITUD zone, we allow for significant parking reductions in those zones, and we don't have any density restriction. In the campus mixed-use zone, we don't allow for parking reductions, and yet we do have a density restriction. We have a couple projects in the pipeline that this will affect, and based on where those buildings are and the projects that are coming forward, we just didn't feel like this density cap made any difference to the project. So we were agreeable or in favor of removing that cap.
Yeah, just a question. So I think this makes sense. I was curious, maybe you could answer the question I emailed you about how close does parking need to be to a project to be considered appropriate?
So in residential projects, it needs to be on site. So, for example, there was a mixed-use building on 100 East across from the old Carnegie Library that went to the Planning Commission. It was the property already zoned, so you never saw that one. But they had commercial space and residential space in that building. We said all the residential units had to be parked on site. The commercial, they got approval from the RDA to put the commercial parking in the Wells Fargo structure, which was close by, but the residential had to be on site. So the ordinance allows for, in residential, it's got to be on site. For commercial, it can be on an adjacent parcel or it can be across the street. It has to have planning commission approval for that, but for residential, it's got to be on site.
So it can't be a block or two away.
It cannot.
You said you had a couple of projects that you see coming in, and it seems to make sense for this. Other possibilities of other projects where maybe it doesn't quite make so much sense, or density still would apply, or is it just basically the mixed-use campus zone it makes sense to just get rid of the whole thing? You don't see any other projects that would...
I think it makes sense just to get rid of that, but the complicated part of that question is, you know that we pre-zoned a large area south of BYU campus to campus mixed use. Based on recent conversations I've been having with a subcommittee of the Lakewood Neighborhood, I think we're going to end up coming forward to you and recommending that, or asking you that you take that CMU zone off the map. There's some specific reasons for that we probably shouldn't go into right now, but to me that makes this even less threatening if now in the future CMU parcels have to come into you for zoning approval. There won't be pre-zoned property out there. That makes this even that much more safe to do something like this, because we're not giving entitlement to already zoned property.
Without going into it, they're getting rid of the CMU zone?
Not getting rid of the zone, getting rid of where we placed that zone in the North Joaquin neighborhood, taking that zone back off the map. Okay. Not getting rid of the zone, taking the zone off the map. I'm sorry if I was unclear on how I said that.
You were good.
So the thing that I'm trying to grapple with is, and maybe I'm mishearing, but at times it sounds like it's saying we've got projects coming in and this restriction is going to be a problem, and then I hear, well, because these are the things that limit it, so this doesn't affect anything, or it's not needed because it's not actually capping anything. So as if whether it's there, whether it's not, that's not what's limiting it, so it doesn't matter if it's there or not, but it needs to be removed because it's limiting this. And so does it limit it or does it not limit it? If it doesn't limit it, what does it matter if it's there?
Certainly it limits it. The density cap certainly has a limitation. What I'm saying is all of these other things influence that same density cap. They all influence density.
Okay.
So even though you may agree to take that cap of 80 off, it doesn't mean it's unlimited now because you've taken that off because of these other provisions which impose, in the end, end up imposing density restrictions. It's not just unlimited. That's all I meant. I'm sorry again.
No. I just want to be clear. We've only got another minute or two on this. I emailed Mr. Yost. I don't know if he's unavailable or whatnot. I would love to see something that kind of helps us understand, like, this is what couldn't happen under the current cap, but could happen if that cap was removed. Just so we kind of can understand with an illustration what kind of impact, what is not currently allowed that could be allowed if we make this change.
Understand the question, Josh? Okay.
Thank you.
So when it comes to what effect this is going to have on density, and you're right that these other things, including parking ratios, determine the overall possible density on any parcel. I mean, it's like we all know E equals MC squared, but for me, parking ratios equal density.
Yes, that's right. That's influenced in the downtown ITUD zones because we have provisions that allow for some reductions. So there is some slide there, some play there. But yeah, talk to any architect and they'll tell you the biggest thing that impacts what actual density they can achieve is their ability to park it.
And that comes into play also when you consider parking permit programs and how you allocate parking within that.
Well, yes and no. We never in the past have we counted on-street parking towards a project's minimum or requirement.
Oh, exactly. I'm just saying that, like in the Joaquin neighborhood, we're looking after the fact at addressing some of the problems that have developed over the years.
Yeah.
So we will see this tonight. We'll have an opportunity to ask more questions then. Thank you, Mr. Pepperoni. Moving on, item 10, an ordinance amending the general plan map from commercial to public facilities for approximately 23 acres, and from commercial to mixed use for approximately 12 acres, located at the northwest corner of our golf course. And we welcome Mr. Josh Yost to
present to us.
Thank you. This proposal aligns the current general plan map and some policies with the intent of the administration and the council to facilitate the development of a medical school and associated housing on these parcels. The current general plan, if you can go to the next page, currently has that large red area up in the upper left, which was originally put in the general plan to accommodate a potential large regional retail development in that area. With the change for the intent of that area to the medical school and its housing, we're coming in to adjust the general plan to be in line with that. And there are also a couple policies in the general plan that you can see in the staff report that's provided to you in your packet that need to be removed that specifically reference two issues, particularly the creation of a large retail center in this area, and two, that directs or calls for analysis of the relocation of the golf course to potentially accommodate that retail development. Both of those policies are obviously no longer pertinent, and we'd like to just tidy up and make sure that the language is consistent and compatible with the map, and remove those two policies as well.
I noticed in the report there was also some talk about one of the central area policies is for commercial oriented on the freeway exits. I don't believe this area is part of the central area, so I'm not sure that there's a conflict there, but the other two pointed out. I would support updating our general plan to reflect the current policies.
Josh, I know that we talked about the residential as we rezone this. Is the zoning going to be tied to the school, or could they go in and change? Oh, we changed our mind. Maybe we're just going to do the whole thing residential and just rent it to anybody.
So there's two issues I think in your question. The first is that we're not actually changing the zoning here.
Is it all?
And we haven't changed the zoning.
Okay, so it's all PF right now.
No, actually
Did we get it to the residential?
No, the R actually is showing when our mapping team made this map, they put the future designations on top of the current designations. So right now, that north piece is actually zoned commercial, what we call the Nature Sunshine piece.
Right.
And the south piece is actually zoned PF, based on a zone change that we actually brought to you in December.
I remember that, right.
So right now, the zoning is in place to entitle the development of the medical school, but the zoning is not in place for the development of the housing. We anticipate with the zone change to accommodate the housing, bringing in a development agreement to ensure certain performance standards with that residential development, but without coming to you and changing the zone on the medical school piece to a zone that accommodates residential. It could not be anything that's not permitted in the current medical facilities, public facilities zone. So there's no potential for that to happen without additional legislative action.
Thank you.
We will be seeing this tonight?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll be seeing this tonight. More opportunity to ask questions. Are there any other questions right now from Mr. Yost? Thank you very much. Item 11, an ordinance to amend the general plan regarding the downtown master plan to clarify right-of-way improvements for First West. And we welcome Gavin Weaver. Is it Weaver?
Weaver, yes.
All right.
So with recent developments happening along 100 West, we have two large projects occurring. Staff saw a need to look at the downtown master plan and see if it does address the 100 West corridor, but we thought we might look at that more clearly and see what we could do with these new developments coming in. The 100 West corridor, the downtown master plan identifies First West as a pedestrian corridor, and so we wanted to look at that area and make sure that we are creating an actual pedestrian corridor. If you could go forward a couple of slides, next slide, one more. This slide. So staff, there is a cross-section in the downtown master plan. However, staff met with Public Works, Engineering, Redevelopment Agency, and Economic to develop this cross-section. This is the current one on the left, and this is the proposed cross-section on the right side. what we decided upon in meetings was to have parking only on the east side of 100 West. It would be back and 45-degree parking. We thought we would experiment a little with that. Public Works didn't do a study along that corridor, and so it's a pretty low volume of vehicles, about 2,000 to 3,000 vehicles per day. We would also have a larger sidewalk on the east side of the street. With the project that is on the IFA block, there's that proposed for the over the pedestrian bridge going over the railroad track from this station, and this would tie in to the larger sidewalk on the east side of the street. So with this, you would still have bike lanes on each side of the roadway, auto traffic on both lanes, and back in 45, which we saw was seeing that it's safer for pedestrians and for bicyclists to have the bike lane in front of the cars. So when you do back in or you pull out, you do notice, hopefully, a bicyclist. Yes?
What section of First West is this?
Thank you. This is between 100 South and 600 South. And so we did see also the 100 between First and Second South has the new Skin and LDS Temple parking garage going down below that. So that section of the street would have to be adjusted slightly. Public Works did speak with UDOT, and I know they are going to be redoing 300 South in the near future. And if this does get adopted into the plan, they would put in a pedestrian bicycle signal as like on 3rd South and 2nd East at 100 West and 3rd South, which would help the connectivity of this pedestrian corridor along the 1st South to 6th South location.
Public Works signed off on this?
Yeah.
They've been meeting together with community development.
You're okay for sure.
Unless they say, I haven't been involved, but I know they have been meeting with them, so.
Yeah, David Graves and David Day and a few other Davids have all met with staff regarding this, yes. Yes.
So if you take off parking on one side and make it diagonal back in parking on the other, what's the net loss or gain on a block face?
We see about 30 vehicles can park roughly on one side of the street. So it's about 25% loss. Overall, yes. Within this area, it is the TOD zone and downtown 1 and 2, which does have the parking reduction, as well as some of the developments that go in the area too.
That's in perfect conditions, Dave. We have some blocks with a lot of driveways that you could not parallel park anywhere near that number of cars.
Right.
Do we see anything, how far does that walking corridor go?
100 South, 600
I
South,
mean,
so five blocks.
We don't do anything up to the north at all?
No.
That's not designated as the walking corridor on north?
It is talked about as a pedestrian corridor, but we aren't focusing on that for this section for this. This would just be for 100 West, just south of, so first south to 6 south.
So that's the only thing you're focusing on. Do you see any future plans for the north?
There's somewhat, but nothing has come yet, aside from what PEG is doing along
I just see all that development that's going on down the north side. And wonder what potentials. I'd like to see if we're going to do it, I'd like to see it done before we get a lot of construction, before a lot of changes need to be made. So
I think also the harder thing with the north side is you'd still have a lot of homes and driveways, which would, this cross-section would be, it would have to be adapted for something on the north side.
And they're just getting more and more apartments.
Yeah.
And so I see as those things are going in, that we're, you know, if people become used to parking on that street, it's going to be harder to get it turned off.
Mr. Winterson, y'all just adopted the 10 neighborhood plan. The 10 neighborhood plan calls for 100 West pedestrian corridor, north and south street. I'm sorry, it's 300.
Is it
300 West, I'm sorry.
Okay, 300 West is the walking corridor. Okay, well that's actually maybe a better road to do it on, so. Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right, thank you very much. All right, our last item, we've allotted 30 minutes to, is further discussion on council committees, including the review of council board and committee assignments and council goals. I haven't heard any complaints. I think we're pretty well set on the liaison assignments and whatnot.
There's one, I don't know, I guess a typo, but it's listed on the Sheets document, I think, as vice chair of zoning, and I had requested not to be on zoning.
Okay.
I think above it says correctly that I'm not on zoning, but anyway.
You're talking the spreadsheet?
The spreadsheet or the...
Yeah, there it is. It says I'm vice chair of zoning compliance. And I don't think that's what I was requesting. Okay. Because I took on those other committees, I was requesting to step off of zoning.
Thank you for that, for helping us keep that correct. So we've oh, go ahead, Mr. Sewell.
Well, we're making corrections. There's a check mark under my name for the library board. I'm not on the library board. So,
okay. And I believe Mr. Stewart, did someone?
Yep.
Offered to serve on the library board, and that's something that the mayor will need to propose. But yes, Mr. Kenneth.
Yes. So, it was September last year, I got together with Gary and George Stewart, and we started talking about how we needed to bring back the walking parking permit program. And we have had a meeting, but we're not officially an ad hoc committee of the council. And I think the advantage of, I was just talking to Celeste today, and she's like, wow, you know, it's pretty daunting to get at least 1,000 signatures. I said, no, you don't need to get any signatures. If we're, as a council, the ones taking up the torch, then you, as the neighborhood, don't have to do a petition. But anyway, so we would probably need to get it onto a work session and just formally say we're doing an ad hoc committee.
Okay, excellent.
I appreciate being appointed to the housing board. But I don't think it's me, I think it's the other George.
Yeah, oh, is that not correct either? Yeah, that's me. Where is it?
Provo Housing Authority.
Provo Housing Authority down below. That's me.
All right. I'm glad we're able to get these worked out.
I'm always honored to be confused with you.
The clean air that we talked about that I said I'd be interested in, I don't see that.
So I'm wondering if just this has not been updated yet with all of this. So let's.
It's empty.
Okay. Let's take. Oh yeah, this is.
It's most recent one you're talking about.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. This we have updated. Yeah. This is just not the latest. Okay. Yeah, but I think those were all settled. We're just remaking the changes on here, so let's not worry about that. It has been, I believe we have made those corrections. They just are not reflected on the ones above on the screen right now. But we will resolve that. Where we left off last time, we had talked about how we organize ourselves in committees and whatnot, and there had been discussion that some of our standing committees we would shift away from creating the standing committees and having the standing committees to having more ad hoc committees that are appointed to tackle specific issues and address it that way. So similar to this ad hoc committee that Mr. Connect just discussed, we would just create these committees as needed, give them a very defined scope, mission, and move forward. We talked about the two currently standing committees that the council has an appetite to continue would be the housing and zoning compliance. And then we had put together a list. It was really just a brainstorming list of potential goals that we could have. I'm looking at the minutes, and that they're listed on the minutes. And what I propose is, as we do that, there were a lot of things that were just kind of thrown out, ideas, and what I'd suggest is we have this list of projects, and as we have the time and the ability, we take these and then decide how we want to deal with them, whether we create a committee to address them, or whether it's something that our council staff would take on and move forward and just bring back to the whole body, or if it's something that we reach out to the administration and see if it's something that they'd be willing to move forward. And we could address those as it comes on, or as we want to take them on, with conversations with council staff. There is a concern that they have a certain bandwidth that they can move things forward together, and they don't want to get to the point where we're tasking them too much all at once, or too little all at once. And so this is something that we would need to have a good communication with our staff. It's something that I think leadership can try to work with them in our leadership meetings, and then again, as council members, if they say, oh, I've got some time, I want to work on this, let's do that, or there's some urgency to this, but I don't have time, maybe we ask the council staff to work on it. So, but we would have that list of projects of things, and it's a dynamic project. When we accomplish something, it gets knocked off, or if things change and we don't need to address it anymore, it comes off the list. If things like concerns about pet stores comes up, and we have a conversation, we can talk about it. If there's enough interest, we add it to our projects list. Yes, Mr. Knipp.
Okay, so one of the ones that was high on my list as a priority, time-sensitive wise, I mean, you could argue about priorities, but the idea of doing a housing audit is time-sensitive, because if we need to fund that, we need to figure out how much funding and get it into the budget. So that came up in Housing Committee, and Robert Byrne was there, and he's like, that's right down my alley, that's what we do. We'd be happy to spearhead doing a housing audit. And in fact, we have money available for that purpose. Not that they would pay for all of it, but they would pay for some of it. And he said that he would like to partner with, you mentioned Buddy Richards, he said UW students, and then with NeighborWorks, another one of our fellows. And I did talk to Charlene, and she's excited about working together, which is what we really want to encourage, is people working together. So right now, I like to think it's going forward, but we need to follow up on that and say, okay, so you're going to pay for part of this, and assuming the council, wants us to do the housing audit, then how much budget remains so that we can try to start figuring it into the budget for this coming year.
Thank you. Are you controlling the screen? Yes. Could we pull up the minutes for January 22nd? It's the minutes that we approved earlier.
If you go to agendas.provo.org, it should be in the...
That's great, thank you.
And if you'll go to page 10 on that. Okay, so we have this list, and there was no kind of vetting of the items on the list. They were just written down as people contributed them. What I propose is we look at this list as a brainstorming list, a potential projects list, and I imagine, if council members said, well, I'd like to look into disincorporating the city, that might be an issue that we probably wouldn't even want on our project list at all. But if it's something like fireworks, well, you know, if that council member wants to work with, you know, or whatever, you know, even if it's not something that the whole council says, yeah, that's a high priority, but it's something that, you know, that if someone takes on and does it, then yeah, great. That's what I'd like to look at this list as, and so I think today I would like to get a vote on these as just these are projects that we want to have on our list, but I'm hoping we can have things on there that we may not get to, and that's okay. That's what I would propose, that we look at it like that. I do think it would be good to have a vote on these, but again, not necessarily saying we're committed to addressing these this year, but just this is a list of projects that we may look at as we go along.
Well, just a quick update on two things. Dave Sewell and I have talked about two of these. The fireworks issue, I don't think we're going to pursue any further at this point. Dave's talked with Chief Miguel and seen if he had any further reservations about it, and it looks like making any further changes to it at this point would be quite onerous, and it's not supported, at least at this point, by a lot of data from Chief Miguel's point of view about the need for further restrictions. So I think we're going to just sort of, you know, we can monitor that as we move forward. The gravel pit issue, we feel pretty strongly that we want to pursue that and pursue that quickly. So we would love to be authorized to have, and we do think we need help from Brian and Hannah, who've already helped us with that, but just to sort of look at tightening the laws, making sure that there aren't any loopholes. The broader question of just protection of the foothills came up in our conversations with citizens and in our assessment of this whole thing. So we'd like to look at making sure that we have enough strength and teeth in our laws about, you know, someone who is given a grading permit and then decides to abandon it and leave it. Are sensitive lands protection sufficient? Are there enough penalties? So on and so forth. So I mean, we'd love to. We proposed, what did we call it? The Foothills Protection and Committee, something along those lines. But you know, it's a pretty discrete set of questions that are, you know, came up during the whole process of this gravel pit thing, that we just feel like we want to look at, make sure that, and we've already made a commitment to citizens that we would do this, so that's another reason why we feel pretty urgent about moving forward.
Do you want to add hoc committee?
That's what we're asking. Yeah. Excellent. So if I may, let's talk about the list broadly, the budget goals, budget priorities, budget kind of requests, and then let's come back around and look at your specific proposal if that works. Okay. So on this list right now we have accessory dwelling units, short-term rentals, parking policies, zoning compliance, rental dwelling licenses, CIP review, election code review, ranked choice voting, community conversation, comprehensive citywide housing audit, gravel pit issues related to mining, as well as protection of the foothills, fireworks, increase HOA involvement on the neighborhood level, and to ensure best outcome for city facilities. Is there any discussion? Are there any other items that you want to add on to that, or any items you want to discuss whether they? Okay. So is there any concern about taking off the fireworks? Okay. So we'll strike that from the list that we're considering.
And since I put the CIP review on there, I'd like to take that off and just put it on to a work session where we would have a discussion about the bridge that's proposed. It's the current proposal has been on the CIP list for many years. The bridge is Second West, and whether that should be built at Second West, or whether the footbridge is going to be sufficient, or whether you want a bridge at Fifth West, or a footbridge, or even a footbridge at 7th. You have all these crossings that have different needs. If we're serious about doing a bridge, and we want to keep it there, it's 20 million, not cheap, And we need to make sure that we don't build further projects like Starter Crossing that may actually interfere with or preclude you from fitting in a bridge at that location.
Okay, so the proposal is to take it off of the list, and at some point you'll request the administration to
I just need someone else to go with me.
And just request and say, hey, what's your current thinking on this item on the CIP?
Yep.
Okay, is everyone comfortable with that? Okay.
One other question, with our experience over the last few months on signage, I know that the Planning Commission is working on a ordinance to tighten up the ordinance on the University Corridor. And I wonder if we need to look at our signage. Wayne explained it to me today that we have 3 different sign ordinances. Do we need to look at those things and make changes to tighten up any? Is this something the Planning Commission should do, or do we need to tighten up any one of those 3 ordinances that have to do with signage? Because I don't want to have to go through the experience we've gone through for the last 6 months. And neither does the mayor, Wayne, or Isaac.
So I think that's great. So we'll add signage here, and we don't now need to decide is that community, or is that Planning Commission that needs to address that? Do we need committee? We can figure that out later. We just say signage is a project that we potentially could try to tackle this year.
I like that.
Okay. Is that, you feel good about that? Any others that, so CIP will be taken off, fireworks will be taken off. Do people feel comfortable with the rest of them? Again, just as a potential project. And if there's no concerns, I'll look for a motion to
Might I just make a suggestion before you do that? We have just set up, we're bringing over the actual spreadsheet with these on.
Oh, yes.
And if you are prepared to do it, accepting it, you could also, we could throw on council members who are going to take that on or whatever. Just, we'll show you what we've trying to keep track of what you've been deciding as you talk.
If it's okay, I'd actually prefer not to start assigning these, and as Mr. Hanley and Mr. Stool are doing, just when we're at the point where people want to take them on, they'll propose themselves, and bring that up. So I'd actually prefer not to try to make those assignments at this time.
I would like to point out, I think some of them are already kind of assigned, as in housing audit. Well, yeah, the housing audit is right. Provo Housing is kind of raising their hand for that one. The HOA engagement communication is nearing completion. That's Karen, who has spearheaded that with her office. And then the election code review. We did a lot of work on that last year, and I'm trying to remember which committee did that.
That was
Policy Governance.
Policy Governance, we tackled that. I've been meeting with our recorder and deputy recorder, working on some things, and so I think there's going to be kind of, but there still is some policy questions that.
So that committee will finish it.
I think Policy Governance is looking at just finishing up the parking permit application process, and I think that will conclude there. And so we'll just create an ad hoc committee for election code. Council members who are interested in that can grab that. And
okay, this raises the question of right now, if you go back to the list of the committees in ad hoc, Policy Governance is listed as a standing committee.
Yes. If we can pull up the minutes again, I believe the minutes from, scroll down a little bit.
And did we
keep going just a little bit lower? Following committees. That said, we're discontinued until further notice. I think it was more of, we said that they were going to wrap up as they finished what we were actively working on.
Right, but I'm just saying that in the past, the council has established the Policy Governance Committee as a standing committee. That's how it's listed and defined. And I don't know that we had official vote to disband And I would vote against that. I think it's a needed committee.
Okay, excellent. So excellent. Let's take that up as soon as we finish the projects list, and before we talk about the budget, if that's okay.
And I would also point out that the housing committee and zoning, which I think are ones that we will always have housing and zoning problems, and there will be enough to keep them busy, to give them purpose. Right now they're ad hoc, and so we just need to decide going forward which committees should be standing and which ones are ad hoc, because if they're ad hoc, they automatically disappear when they're done.
Right. Okay. Yes, we'll do that. Okay. Hannah, thanks for driving. Appreciate that. If we can go back to the list of projects, minus fireworks, minus CIP, adding signage. Let me just also add pet stores. Or propose to add pet stores.
We're good.
Do we feel okay about adding that to our potential projects list?
What?
Sorry, pet stores. That was the kind of question about cats and dogs and rabbits.
Parvo?
And parvovirus. There was an email that was sent around, and I want to say like 6 council members, at least 6, came back and said, yeah, this is something that we'd like to look at. Yes, Mr. Sewell.
I don't know if you want to complicate this or not, but there's kind of a related issue. Gephardt is doing a story about no-kill shelters in Utah County that aren't no-kill, that let dogs and cats be euthanized and stuff, and there's some newer policies that can deal with that. So is that related enough to?
I think so. And again, we're not saying that there's going to be a committee for this. All we're saying is this is an issue. An issue. And I don't know who's driving, but there's also the tobacco sales, age 21. That's been an item of discussion already. So again, this is kind of showing how this list may evolve as we go throughout the year. Things get pulled off as we deal with them. New things get added. Some of them may go quickly. Some of them may take months to work on.
And some may not need an ad hoc committee at all.
Absolutely.
It's just a couple of council members willing to sponsor it, get it on the agenda, and talk about it, and decide what to do.
Yep, exactly.
Why don't you take pet stores and maybe pet issues, which would include yours?
Okay, pet issues?
Issues instead of stores, or stores and issues.
I like that.
Got some pet issues.
All right, so with that, I'll look for perfect. I'll look for a motion to accept these as our current project list for the council.
One further, I see police issues are there. Did we have a clear idea of what we were trying to do there?
So when we pulled up the list that was on the minutes, police issues was not there, and so I didn't address it. But if it's on this one, I would propose, and I think we've had this conversation, but let me just state it again. I propose that we take the police issues off of a projects list, because again, I think it needs our support budgetarily, but does not need any effort legislatively.
Right.
So
I agree.
You agree, Mr. Sewell?
Make a motion that we remove police issues from this list and adopt the amended list. That's my project list. A second.
Okay. Any comment on the motion?
We had the same kind of discussion on the best outcome of facilities. So now you've adopted a bond, it's up to the administration to take care of building the new facilities.
Okay, so let's have some conversation about the ensure best outcome of facilities. There was a team, I'm not even sure what to call it, that was put together, and we had a request to consider adding one of the council members to that team with the idea of just the oversight role that the council has. And so whether it's on this list or not, that's I guess one of the reasons why I didn't point to that and say should we remove this as well, just because this is such an important thing for the city, and we appreciate the partnership that we have, and so.
It is important, but if it's being addressed properly, then we don't need to do anything else.
True. And if that's the council's will, we'll pull it off. I don't have any heartburn having it on there because I think it is so important that I think it's good for us to always keep in mind we should be paying attention to this.
But if someone were to be appointed to that committee, which I think sounds like a great idea, and I would love that communication, then it would. I think it would be appropriate to leave it there because even if it's just one person who's acting as the liaison, that one person can also bring back any questions and concerns to the council that maybe need more input. So it's a light task maybe, but I think it's very important to all of us. So.
Okay. Just a couple comments on that. There may be some reasons why it would be difficult to have a council member on the committee. Maybe there's some other kind of structure that we can look at. We haven't heard back.
What about Cliff?
Right. We haven't heard back from the administration on that, but that's something we're actively looking at. Regardless of that, just wanted to update the council on that. Regardless of that, I guess the question is, a quick vote or something. Do we want to leave ensure best outcomes on the project list, or do we think it should be taken off? If you're in favor of keeping it on, raise your hand.
It's still a little fuzzy, so let's keep it on.
Okay, and then if you prefer to take it off. Okay, so we'll move forward with the motion that we have on the table and the second. Any other conversation? Okay, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? And those opposed? Okay. In favor were Mr. Winterton, Mr. Connect, Mr. Handley, Mr. Harding, Mr. Stewart, and Mr. Sewell. And opposed was Mr. Van Peer. Okay. Let's, got a few minutes left. Let's flip to the current standing committees. So if we can pull up. I'm sure the best place to pull up the current standing committees.
That's the discussion. When you say current,
Do you want that one or do you want the table?
I'll do
that right now.
Maybe even the minutes. I think the minutes list.
Okay.
So, I'll scroll down. So it says the following committees were discontinued, and that's probably we might not approve, but so we have the Policy Governance Committee, we have the Council Rules Committee, we have the Impact Fee Review Committee, and the DAPRA Committee, the Development Approval Process Review Committee. So, go ahead, Mr. Sewell.
Just a really minor point. I actually don't remember voting on this.
Exactly, and that's what we're doing now. Okay. This wasn't the conversation. Yeah. It was not decided on, and so we're now circling back on the conversation and discussion. Thank you for that.
Okay, so I would just make the case that I agree with all of them except the policy governance. Okay. And without having it in front of me, I'm just thinking that the policy governance is the only one that was a standing committee and the others were ad hoc.
Well, I believe rules was standing.
The rules committee? Okay. So I just think there's two levels. I mean, if it's ad hoc and we're done, then it's an easy, we're done. But it's to take a standing committee which was established for specific reasons, not for one-time issues. To me, the Policy Governance Committee is a good catch-all place. If you can't figure out or don't have any other place, they can cover, because of the way their mission statement is, really anything, any policy that we want to be discussing. So if it doesn't fit into housing or zoning or neighborhood, then you can put it there if you choose to, just like we've done with a number of issues. So I think it serves a purpose, and I would be in favor of keeping that as a standing committee.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Connect. And just to mention that the two other committees, I guess those are technically ad hoc, but the zoning compliance and the housing we're talking about continuing those two. Rules Committee and Policy Governance Committee, those were created 5 years ago. Does anyone remember? If I remember the history, about 5 years ago, and it said, you know, how do we best want to organize ourselves? And these committees were created. The mission statement for the Rules Committee is the Rules Committee reviews council rules and procedures and brings suggested improvements to the council for consideration. And the Rules Committee was very active in 2017. We basically overhauled the handbook and then didn't meet last year because maybe my dates may be off a little bit. But.
Well, you know, just on the Rules Committee, I think there will always be the potential for additional rules-related questions coming up. But from my perspective, I don't think it's necessarily a big deal if you disband the committee, because I think the default is that leadership handles those questions if there is no committee. So I think the committee was formed primarily because there was an intent to do an in-depth study of the handbook and the rules, and now and to handle ongoing issues. And I think those issues do and will continue to arise, in my opinion. But you know, if the council is comfortable with leadership being the default place for those questions to be taken first, that seems fine in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Policy Governance Committee mission statement. The mission of the Policy Governance Committee is to examine existing and proposed policy and bring recommendations to the council body relative to the vision and policy for the council and Provo City. And as been stated, I mean, that's a pretty broad mission statement. I mean, we could say everything that the Housing Committee looks at actually is a policy of the council in Provo City. So, you know, maybe we shouldn't have a Housing Committee. It should all be handled by that. And I mean, pretty much every I may be missing something, but it seems like just about everything we do could fall under that.
Right. But as I explained, if you have either standing committees or ad hoc committees that are just specializing in certain areas, then it makes sense to have them address those areas. But for those things that are not easily assigned to whoever, then the Policy Governance Committee can take it up.
Yep.
In fact, I don't know how we want to approach this, but the Housing Committee, for example, just by taking on the A and S overlay and combining that with something that community development really appreciated. It was like, oh, you simplified our code, you resolved a lot of questions. There are, I couldn't tell you how many things on the books that community development has not had the time because of their workload to actually go in there and fix. Like, you look up our definition of family, it's crazy. And they go, well, that's wrong. You just ignore that. But why should it be there? It should be, someone should easily, you know, to spend time to address it and remove it and correct it. And there's lots of places where they could go forward if we help them. And Bill said, you know, I really appreciate what your staff has done, you know, Bryce and Hannah, and so us working together with them to clean up code is very productive.
Okay, great. And I absolutely agree with that. So this is how the council decided to organize themselves 5 or so years ago. What I'm kind of proposing that we organize ourselves a little bit differently. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I just think that the way that this has been done could also be done. You said, you know, well, we have some committees that address certain issues, and if anything else, well, it goes on the project list, and then we can decide, is this something that needs to go to a committee? Where before we might just say, well, okay, send it to the Policy Governance Committee. But now what I'm proposing is we say, oh, we feel like a committee is necessary for this. Let's create an ad hoc committee to address that specific issue. When it's done, the ad hoc committee goes away. And so it's a different way of organizing ourselves. I agree that there's been there's been a role for the Policy Governance Committee. And that, I think, is a perfectly acceptable way if we want to continue to organize ourselves that way. My proposal, though, I'd like to propose that we allow the Policy Governance Committee to disband after finishing what they're actively working on, and then anything that would go to them, that would have gone to them, we look at creating an ad hoc committee to address.
So what standing committees would be left?
We would have our budget committee, which is the committee of the whole, and
the neighborhood by ordinance.
Yes, the neighborhood advisory board, or the neighborhood advisory committee, whatever that's called.
Yeah.
That definitely would be a standing committee, and everything else would be ad hoc, treated as needed. Though I think we've talked about proposing a new mission statement for the housing committee and making that standing. So that would become standing, but otherwise, what I would propose is everything else would be ad hoc and created as needed. So perhaps can we have a motion on what to do with those 4 committees that were listed in the minutes?
Hannah, can you pull up the spreadsheet for this?
Where was the committee?
The other one, committee one.
The which one, sorry?
The committee one.
Committee.
Council committees and liaison assignments.
So one easy way to do this is just
Go down to
decide
the bottom.
which ones we're going to have a standing, and everything else is ad hoc if it exists at all.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I'm hearing, but let me just tell us if there's anything missing from this.
So where's the neighborhood committee on there?
Neighborhood's up here, at the very top. Hannah, can you scroll to the very top?
Mayor, I'm really excited about your development committee here, department, and helping them come along. And I see the council's committee that we had as an ad hoc committee on the development approval process. Let us know if we can help on that. I think that's really exciting.
And if you reduce the size, reduce the size in the upper left, you might be able to get them all in one page.
And I'm not sure we need to see the liaisons. I think it's really just,
Just giving you a broader picture of what you've got. It might be hard to read.
Yeah,
It's a little hard to read, so we need to get them all on, unless we don't mind cutting off earlier.
So we're going to go back up to 90.
So it's into 80.
So I think the question is, we had Dapper, we had, can we go to the minutes? I think and then scroll down to past there. So we've got Policy Governance Committee, Council Rules Committee, Impact Review Committee, and Development Process Review Committee. I believe the only one that's still active is the Policy Governance Committee, and the discussion is possibly disbanding that after they finish the last thing. But we could have a proposal for something different if that's what the council wants to move to. I think those are the 4 that are kind of, we've discussed something and we need to make a decision now. So I'll make a motion, and we'll see if it has some support. I move that the Policy Governance Committee be made to be an ad hoc committee, and that the other 3 committees listed on the screen be disbanded.
Until or unless needed.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can always recreate them, exactly.
I'll second that. Just a question about the Policy Governance Committee, and I know that we've been working closely with community development on that. So is it, I guess, either the community development or council would bring an idea to, who do we bring it to? Community development, or do we bring it to the council, or do we bring it, where, if we have an idea, where do we take it to? Before we take it to the council, policy governance committee, and say, what do you guys think, right? Or
I would say, just as we've seen on the last couple of issues, just communicate with council members and say, hey, this is a project I'd like to take a look at, and if there's support, then we add it to our list and figure out the best way to move forward on it.
So your proposal is not to necessarily eliminate the policy governance committee at this time, but to make it ad hoc.
Ad hoc.
And so that's almost saying it's on probation. And if it fails to really generate enough stuff, then you say, well, I guess we don't need it anymore. A standing committee is kind of the higher level. Like,
you're going to meet and regularly, right? And you're going to have an agenda every time. But the ad hoc model feels like if there's nothing going on, don't waste people's time.
And then if it doesn't generate enough meetings, and we met once this year, well, okay, we're done.
Yeah, I'd love it to be nimble and like, we want to address whatever, the pet issues. We are going to meet, and maybe it's, depends on committee members, maybe it's twice a week, but maybe it's once a month. We're going to meet for 3 months, and we're going to get this done, and it's not like it just peters out. It's like, we are done, we've submitted it to the council approves it, and we're done, we're over. And now we can pick something else off of the project list to move forward.
So I support your motion, and then after we vote on that, maybe we have a short discussion on the future designation of the housing committee.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Motion is to move policy governance to ad hoc and disband the others. All in favor? Yes, we have a second. And all opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. We have some council members in writing wrote up what they want. They have a proposal, so let's address that. We also have to keep an eye on time. We need to probably break for dinner before we move into our next meeting.
And the food is here.
And the food is here. But let me give the time for the ones that have it in writing, and then we'll circle back around after that. Whoever wants to take that.
I'd like to make a motion that we create the Foothill Protection Committee with Mr. Hanley as chair and me as a member, with the following mission statement: review the current staff report on the gravel pit issue and bring it to the council for approval to release to the public, bring recommendations to the council for legislative changes to consider as a result of the lessons learned.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. For discussion, is anyone else? Yes.
Do you by chance have that in writing, and could you email it to me so I could have it exact?
I'll forward it to you.
That would be great, thank you.
Okay.
You mean you don't get everything exact?
I just want to make sure that your mission statement is...
Excellent, thank you. The only other discussion I would have on that is just, is there any other council member that's interested in that? And as we create these committees, one thing, just not targeting this one, but just generally, when the council creates one, I would highly recommend that when we create these, we feel comfortable with the makeup of the committee, so that when that committee makes a recommendation to us, we have high confidence in their recommendation. And so often it's good to have people of opposing viewpoints on the committee, so that their work, we feel comfortable with the work as they go forward. I don't know if this would be anyway, just let me throw that out there as a general thing. We have a motion and a second. Is there any consideration of other council members wanting to be on that committee?
I'd consider it, since most of that gravel pit area issues came up in my district. And so I'd be glad to talk with you about that also.
If you'd like to be on the committee, I'll amend the motion to include Mr. Lincoln.
Okay, thank you. Any other second? Second still stand. Do you still second the? Okay, excellent. Any other
Just one question on the mission statement. It sounded like it was specifically about the gravel pit issue. So the foothill protection. Description of the ad hoc committee.
Bullet point on that, or did I write that?
Was there more?
That was all we had for the mission statement.
Will you read it one more time?
Review the current staff report on the gravel pit issue and bring it to the council for approval to release to the public. Bring recommendations to the council for legislative changes to consider as a result of the lessons learned. So it's kind
That's
of...
where...
So that widens it out to...
Yeah, okay, that's good. That's fine. Okay. Any other discussion on this motion? Okay, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Excellent. All right. The two other things. the one is, we probably have time. I would like just to make sure we can communicate to the administration where we as a body stand on some of the budgeting issues that we've talked about, but let's continue that to a future date. The other thing is,
I would like to actually defer the housing committee in favor of making a motion to create an ad hoc committee, the walking parking permit committee, and its goal would be to work together with all the stakeholders to bring forward a parking permit program.
okay,
And then we already have met, kind of, and that was me and George and Gary Winterton, George Stewart, and I don't know if you guys want me to be the chair or if you have a preference, but those are the three members.
Okay. Okay, so that was a motion, and was that the mission statement was embedded in there?
Yeah, basically to work together with all the stakeholders to bring forward a parking permit program.
Okay.
When you said you were going to defer the housing committee, was that a discussion about the housing
Yeah,
committee?
just-
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Right,
yeah, that's not part of the motion.
Because it's ad hoc, and if we want to bump it up to the next level, we can talk about that later.
So to do that, I thought that the Policy Governance Committee was still addressing that as an ad hoc thing.
So what we're addressing as the Policy Governance Committee is the process by which the public requests
And this would be a specific parking permit.
Yes, so I see those as separate things.
Okay.
Thank you. So we have a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Stewart. Discussion? I'd like to discuss this a little bit. I mean, parking, if you remember when we were here last year, we narrowed our priorities down to 5. And I was advocating very hard for a 6th one, which was parking. Parking to me is a passion. It's something that I've been trying to work on even before I got on the council, and at least at one of those meetings, I don't know if it was a joint meeting with housing and zoning, but we had a joint meeting where we talked about walking parking permit program. You know, we've already have 3 on the committee, but boy, I would sure love to be on that committee.
I'll trade, you can have that. I took 2 other committees, you can have that.
Sold. Take that as an amendment. I appreciate that, Mr. Winter.
That's Joaquin?
The Joaquin parking committee.
That would be great.
Parking permit, parking committee?
Parking permit committee.
Joaquin parking permit committee. Okay, so we have an amended motion. The second still stands. Okay, any other discussion on that? Mr. Stewart?
Just a clarification, I assume that was Mr. Knick, the chair, is that what?
Yes. And it seems like we've also said that a vice chair should be designated as well. If I remember the rules. George Stewart is vice chair. And does your second stand? Yes. Thank you for keeping us on track. Mr. Stratford.
With that in mind, then you've got Foothills Protection does not have a vice chair.
Okay.
Let's vote on this first.
Is that?
We'll vote on this first and then come back and rectify that. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, all in favor? All right, that is unanimous. I'll entertain a motion to add a vice chair to the It's getting late. Foothills Protection Committee.
Who's the chair? Are you two? Okay, I nominate Dave. I would like to see Dave do that. He knows more about it than I do and I'm the other member, so.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Mr. Stewart, any discussion? All in favor? That's also unanimous. All right, unless there is an objection, we will now adjourn by unanimous consent.